So I guess you all know that you are here for an easy platform or easy publish developer introduction, getting started thing. So it will last about 3 hours, mostly led by my colleague going out for an emergency. So in the meanwhile, I'm going to quickly introduce you, let's say 20 minutes, to the basics and specifics of easy platform and easy publish. But first, I would like to know who knows what about what, just to know where we're standing and what we can actually tell you and show you. So, anybody knows something about web development? I guess on this one we should all be fine, hopefully.
Can you please move your microphone away from your mouth?
Better?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah? PHP, I guess we are all fine. Maybe those who don't know PHP? Perfect. Symfony, that's more interesting. So who has not used Symfony 2 at all so far? One hand, that should be manageable. About easy in general, a couple of years ago, we started rewriting it, and we wrote it based on Symfony 2. So Easy Platform, the new product, is now a full Symfony 2 application. So if you know something about Symfony, if you've used it, well, you know a lot about Easy already. And I will show what we have added that is specific, and then Jérôme will guide you and do more of a live coding session to show the basics of building a website. And out of curiosity, about Easy Publish, the old one, who has experience with it? That's a couple of hands. I know at least 2 who did not raise their hand and do have experience, but they're not listening. So I don't have an agenda. Install we'll do together. Same here. Okay, that's more interesting. The core of Easy Platform, what we try to put our value on, is content, because it's a content management system, and content is what we manage. So the core of our work is actually a repository, pretty much like PHP content repository or similar frameworks, where we provide everything you need to organize, store, retrieve, and present information based on flexible data structures. That's kind of the most important point. Even when moving to Easy 5, we have kept what made Easy 4 popular. That is the fact that you are not restricted to a particular content model. You are not limited to articles or whatever. You can build what matches your domain and your business logic. So, and the basics of CMS is having content on a hand and design on the other hand. That's also mandatory, but well, it still needs to be highlighted. In our case, presentation with Easy Platform is made through Symfony and Twig. So controllers, Twig templates, nothing brand new here. About data storage, we won't spend much time on this. We have a database. We store stuff on a file system. And based on that, we build web pages. So this schema is like, I think, 12 or 13 years old, but it hasn't changed much. It's pretty simple. So our content engine, that's our main thing. Well, as I said, it's a flexible content model. Object-oriented, that's kind of, it was something that was worth mentioning 10 years ago. It's not worth mentioning really anymore. Transaction safe, with version management, that's kind of important. Any content that is edited creates a new version so that you can always roll back to an old version. Sorry. So that's the interesting part. So what we used to call content classes in Easy Publish Legacy is now called content types. So a content type will be, a type of content. So like an article, like a blog post, like a person, like a place, or an event, you name it. Each content type has fields, in our case, field definitions, and each field has a name and a type. That's the minimum. So in the case of our article up there, it has a title, that is a text line. It has an intro, also a text line or a text block, and a body that is an XML field. Parenthesis about the XML thing. As said earlier, we separate presentation and design. That's why we don't store HTML. Nobody edits HTML with Easy. Well, at least not officially. People do sometimes, but we don't do this. We store XML. So we have WYSIWYG editor, but that edits XML. We have quite a few evolutions on that lately. So in Easy Platform, we store rich texts using a docbook, and it's converted to HTML or even PDF or text messages or TV prompters, whatever you need. If we had stored HTML, we wouldn't have been able to do that. It should be transparent for you as a user, but it's a pretty customizable place. So once you have this article content type or whatever content type, you create as many instances of it as you need. In that case, we have 3 articles, one titled Penguin, another Scooter, and the last Megaphone. So we can have as many instances as you want, and it's actually what editors do. They create instances of content types which were designed when creating the base of the website. So that's like the most important part of content itself. Content types which you create, later created as content itself. Any question about that? It was unlikely. So, well, we use the database, so it's an ACID database. I don't think it's really worth mentioning. So transaction safe, isolated, and so on. You don't really need to care about that. Well, you don't really need to care about that. That's all. So versioning, as I said before, every content has version. Actually, one content, the content itself is inside a version. So you have at least one version per content, and then every time you edit something, it creates a new version, and the old one is kept. So in that case, we have 2 versions where everything was edited in the second one. And that's it. So you see the basic metadata of the content up there. Every content has an ID. It has a name, a type, and a few other properties, but those are the main ones. And then in each version, we store the value for every field of the content type. Every version has a status. It's a bit small to read, but basically it shows the life cycle of an object. You create an object, you have a draft. You can either trash this draft, in which case it disappears, or you can publish it, in which case the version becomes published. Then you can edit, and you get a new version. While editing, the first version is still published, the new one is a draft. And if you publish this new version, the first version gets archived and can be restored, and the new version is published, and rinse and repeat. That's version management. It's usually fairly transparent to developers. You don't really need to care about it, but it can be useful in advanced cases. So multi-language, that's one part where we have always been quite good. We've supported more than 30 languages for about 15 years. Actually 64 now, right, on 64-bit systems. And it goes through version management. So each version has 1 or more languages, up to 64. And we store the value of fields for each version. And that's pretty much all there is to know. You will configure your system and say how many languages you have. It usually starts with 1 language, by default English, British. And then you add the ones you need. So we have content. You should see content as something that is just lying in a pool somewhere. So content is like unordered documents just thrown out as a pile somewhere. To locate your content somewhere, you need to create locations. It's done transparently when working from the interface. You have like a tree. Every location has a parent. And below locations, you can create new locations. And each location references 1 content. And this creates the tree that you will see in the interface. One interesting part is that every content might have multiple locations, kind of a symbolic link for your contents, meaning that you can locate one content in as many places as you want. It has quite a few use cases. It's one way to structure and expose content. But again, for at least the first version, it's completely transparent, and you kind of don't create, at least by default, content without locations. So far we have seen the content types that you create content from. Each content has at least one version or several versions, and each content is referenced by at least one location. Those terms are usually used quite consistently, both in documentation and code. The services and everything reference those words. So there is like 15, 20 words whose meaning really matters when developing. The system comes with a couple default locations. So we have a root location, like the root of the tree. And below that, you will find, by default, content, media, and users. The two grayed one on the right, just ignore them. They've been there for ages, and we don't really use them anymore anyway. But content is, well...
The users, are they the administration users or the public users? Or both?
All of them.
All of them. Okay, thanks.
So yeah, currently by default you have admin user and an anonymous user, and then when people register, it will create a new user. And when you need to add editors, well, you will just create new users.
User is content.
And so far, users are content. We are considering moving away from that because we had issues with websites that had like million users. Unfortunately, thanks to the new version, we will be able to do that. But so far, every user is a piece of content, meaning that every user has fields like signature, avatar, bio, location. Depending on your situation, you can create very complex user profiles.
And about users, since the Easy Publish 5, maybe from 5.2 or 5.3, it's possible to use different system for authentication. So you can store your users elsewhere, like using a false user bundle, for instance, so that you can use NoSQL storage compatible with the false user bundle or LDAP or whatever. The only thing that the Easy platform will need is a valid user with valid roles and permissions for authorization, but this is a bit more advanced.
Oh, by the way, one thing I wanted to say at the beginning, this won't be very hands-on because we have like 3 hours. The last time we had like 6 or 8 hours for this, or 9 hours, and it was already short. So we know that if you start doing everything, we pretty much won't get anything done. So Jérôme will do more like live coding. You can, I guess, also try a few pieces of what he does. We want it to be interactive, but it cannot be hands-on given the time we have. Even though you do have a repository that should be working with at least the basics of what we are going to integrate.
But we'll try to live code all together. That should be okay.
And at least you can blame him for syntax errors and things that can be improved. So as that's an illustration of what I said earlier about content and locations. On the left, we have content, completely unordered, just sitting there doing nothing. And then on the right, we have these locations tree. Up there is location ID 2. That's the content root location. And you could see if it was bigger that it references the first content. Below this one, we have 2 locations. Both have as a parent location the one above, number 2. And they reference the second, the second one for the one on the left. I'm a bit lost. And the third one for the one on the right. And then below that, we have another one, and we can see that the second content, number 31, is referenced by both the one up there and this one here. So just multiple locations. For
really newcomers, it might appear a bit complex, but it's actually not really different from the file system. As Bertrand already said, multiple locations are much like symbolic links, or or hard links maybe. So you can think your content as a file on the file system. I mean the concrete one, and the location, the hard links to the files, and then it's just a hierarchy. That's pretty much it.
Do we need to go over this? Well, that's kind of the architecture, but it's actually not the architecture of Easy Platform, because we're missing one big piece and we have extra pieces. But I will go quickly over it. On the right part, you have the new stuff. On the left part is the old system. Because what we have done when creating Easy 5 is encapsulating the legacy application into the new Symfony 2-based application. So I won't go over legacy because we won't cover it in this workshop at all. We will even use the new UI. But what you have on the bottom, well, on the right at the bottom here is persistence and IO SPI. That's an important part. It's like the most important thing we did when writing Easy 5. We created a set of interfaces, PHP interfaces, for everything about persisting data. So that we have an abstract way. And we created a first implementation that stores data in the old database. That was our goal for the first version. So we have that, it works. It's been working for 5 versions now. But we will most likely create ones later for more modern engines or whatever is required, like NoSQL, or it's not done yet, it's not even started, but it's a distinct possibility. Then on top of that, we have our kernel. The kernel is where everything is implemented. That's why we have the business logic, where we articulate how content interacts with locations, with fields definitions, and so on. Everything here, if you are just developing, you don't really care about it. What you care about is what is above the public API. I will show very briefly how it's organized. It's what you will use when writing controllers and writing projects. And this one is, when we say public, it's actually the only part we will maintain. We say that those interfaces won't change. They will remain backward compatible in semantic versioning, meaning for a while. And you can rely on them. We won't break them. But unlike before, everything below that might be changed at any point, because, well, we kind of need to get the software evolving. And if you don't distinguish what is private and what is public, well, you can't. So public API, big part. Then above that, on the right is the REST API. We have a fully working REST API for the repository, where you can create, retrieve, update, delete everything from the repository, content, locations, content types. And it is actually what we use in our new back office. You will see it running today. It's been developed quite fast lately. So it's a fully JavaScript-based, almost fully JavaScript application that communicates using the REST API. And then on the left, in blue, you have the controllers and Twig template engine, but it's what we are going to use afterwards, so I'm not going to go over it. And now, since we're a bit more modern, we have what we call platform UI on top of that. It's the new back office. So the public API is what you use to interact with everything in the repository. That's the central piece. As written and underlined, it's obtained through the container in terms of Symfony. So the repository and the services, various services are just Symfony services, which are injected and retrieved. Well, we have an example here. I don't really agree with the example, but...
Because it's using the container to get, so you should use dependency injection, of course, instead. But if you're inside the controller, this you can get the repository almost this way.
So the public API, that's a bit more interesting. And the first line, I don't think you can read back there, right? It's too small, right? Yeah, maybe I can. Well, anyway, what we have first line is getting the repository from the container. And actually, this line it's a wrong line, but we didn't write those slides. But the rest is more interesting. From the repository, you can get individual services. Each part of the domain, contents, locations, field definitions, have a specific service. So we have a content service, a location service, user service, URL alias service.
Search service. Search service,
yes.
One of the most important.
So from the repo, you can get services. If you want to interact on content, you just get the content service, and then you have a set of methods which you can use to interact with content. And it goes the same way for everything else. It's like the only way to interact on content. Just don't go deeper and get weird services from inside, because they might change at any point.
And of course, if you're using proper dependency injection, you don't have to inject the repository, which will be acting like more or less a second container, because it's more like a box. You can inject directly the content service in one of your own services, content service or location service, of course.
But you will show that, right?
No, we will use the API, but in a controller, we won't have time for more.
So here you have an example of how you fetch a content. It's more interesting for the way it's phrased. We have tried to keep the API consistent. For instance, when you want to load one individual item, it's always load. So we have this load content info, where you just give the ID of a content and you get a content info back. If you want to load a location, just location service load location with the content info as an argument, and you get locations back, because one content might have multiple locations. And it goes like this for pretty much everything. If you need to create something, you will have a create content. If you need to delete something, you will have a delete content or delete location. It's pretty consistent. The name of the methods should be quite self-explanatory to begin with. And if you have a properly configured IDE, it's usually fairly simple to get around in the API.
PHP Storm, PHP Storm.
Well, search, you're going to show it anyway. Yes. So those are just some more code examples. Pagination, won't go over it. But I think it covers like the basics, because everything about the application itself, Jérôme will show it when building the site. And yeah, it will be more interesting with the actual code. Yes?
Can you come back to the load location stuff and explain what's the difference or performance difference between loading a content by its ID or by its info? So why choose one,
yes,
one over the other?
Well, actually, the content info, it's one thing that can be mentioned because it's a bit troublesome to begin with. We have two important objects when it comes to content. We have the content itself. A content is the content with the fields and the values and everything. So it's a big object. It's not lightweight to build because we need to fetch database rows. Even though we have cache, it doesn't perform very well. If you don't need it, don't fetch a full content. The content info is actually the metadata of a content. So just one row with ID, type, couple more information, but absolutely nothing when it comes to fields. So it's a lightweight object. And the content info is kind of used all over the place because we'd rather use primitive objects like this than just a scalar or an int or whatever. So the difference...
Well, you have, as Bertrand said, you have a persistence cache in between. So you will have a bit less performance loading the whole content. But basically, the best practice, if you don't need access to the fields themselves, just use content info.
But overall, the content ID will almost only be used in the content service. If I remember correctly, whenever we are outside the content service, we have the content info as the argument,
yep,
and not the content ID.
No, my question was basically load locations by content info versus load location by content ID.
It's exactly the same. Because internally in the business layer, we are using the ID. The load by content info has the advantage of type hinting. So it prevents bad IDs or stuff like that. So then you can use whatever you need. Anyway, the ID will be used internally, so there is no difference.
But yes, we try to rely on objects because, yeah, we have more control over it. It's harder to trick the API and try just to give a random hard-coded ID because you would have to build the content info. And usually if you constrain people to do things the correct way, it pays off in the end. So it's a choice we did. So do you think it's enough as starters?
I think it should be okay, yes.
You want the headset?
Yes, please. Do you have, well, everyone, you will have to, on your VM, you will have to do a git pull. So it's easy platform, I think. Let me check that. Oh, I didn't even launch PHP Storm. That's interesting. Yes, it's in var www summer camp workshops easy platform. So you need to do a git pull here, and then run the run.sh script. So c'est vraiment petit. So it's basically doing installation run.sh. So it will this script will initialize your database.
So I suggest you don't all run the run.sh at the same time, because it might run Composer something, and yeah, you know how it goes.
I don't remember. Maybe this. Okay. Here you go. Maybe it's better. Right. So once you have your you have done your git pull, you will need to git checkout v0 tag, please, because otherwise you will have all the work done. It won't be fun. Are you all ready, or almost? Almost? Yeah, okay, it's running. Right. Well, if you're on V0 and on the V0 tag and everything is pulled and installed, just go to, using your browser, to easyplatform.easysc/easy. And you should be redirected to, well, after the container is being compiled. It's running PHP 7, so it will be fast. Well, on my computer, at least. And you should be on that screen. The password is just publish, admin publish, to enter. Okay, so it seems that we have a typo in the vhost. You will need to open the vhost to edit it. and you have a virtual host star. Just after the star, add a colon 80. I will show you. Right. So it's here. You will need this. Nico, was it, you had to symlink it? Okay. It's inside the installation folder. So you will have to first link it into the sites enabled repository directory. So basically you will have to do something like ln sudo. So here path to your vhost to etc Apache 2 sites enabled easyplatform.conf. And then restart Apache. Okay, so it's a very simple file. In easypublish/config folder, I forgot to version this one. So create easypublish_dev.yml and just write this inside it. Then you will need to wipe out the cache and reload the page. So it was not that well prepared, sorry.
So it looks like it's working for at least a few of you. At least a few.
Yeah.
Who got it working so far? Raise your
Admin
hand just to
publish.
encourage us. One.
Username is admin, password is publish.
Oh, a few at least.
Yes. Oh, cool. With the right config file, it works usually better. So, how many of you are ready? Yeah, already? Yeah?
Come on, at least 5, please.
At least 5, yeah. How many of you are stuck? You're stuck with your hard drive stuff. Sorry. Oh, it moved a bit. So cool.
Well, actually, it's not Composer that is slow. It's writing to the file system that is.
Right. We're going to start to try to start. Okay. Sorry if some of you are stuck. Just when you're ready and you have still an issue, raise your hand and or during the pause, during the break, we will try to have something to help you. Right. So you should be there. So welcome to Platform UI. This is the new admin interface. But before diving in there, maybe I will show you where we are going to go, what we will do. So we have HTML content. Okay. So it's a very simple project that will be used for the beginner tutorial that will be pushed online later this year. So it's like a spotlight or a scoop for you. So it's in Easy Systems. Easy Systems. Summer Camp. Je suis où là? Right. Here it is. So, this is the pure HTML stuff. It's a simple bike club website, and the goal of this one is just to list rides, bike rides. So we will have here a list on the home with the search engine. We won't do everything of here, but you have the list of all rides with the pagination and a ride view. Okay, so so this is pure HTML, like most likely your HTML developer will give you. Okay, here is what you will need to integrate with Easy, and of course it will be easy. Okay, if you look at your the code you already have, you will notice that the bundle is already generated to have more time for the rest. So basically, well, I guess some of you know Symfony at least, just generate a bundle. It's a very simple one, and you have already the resources. Basically, I copied what the HTML developer gave me into the right folders, so in public CSS, in the fonts, the images, and the JavaScript files. So this is, and we will start from index.html. But before that, we need to design the content. So before going to the code, what we need to do is to create the content type, like Bertrand showed you, the model for the ride content. Okay. For now, we will only have to design one content type. So it is basically the ride. Okay. We have a few things here. We will need a starting point. We will need the end point. And for now, we will skip the different steps. Just the distance. We have the difficulty level here. The name of the rider. A description which should be in rich text. And, well, this we will skip because we won't have time to do everything. In the end, we will have pictures taken by the writer. Yes?
And just for information, the reason why we have this website is first because our documentation manager is a biker. They're a family of bikers, you wouldn't believe it. Actually, this is the basics for the tutorial that will be released as the one stop to get started on Easy. So it's kind of a sneak peek on what others, on what everybody will get in the future. We didn't spend so much time just for this event and making it look good like this.
Yes, it's not quite modern, it's very simple. And we will have comments for other people. So, we won't care about multilanguage here. We will just do this in English, just to do a first baby step. Okay, so we will design this and the home page, which will be basically the list of all rides that we will create. Okay, so first thing first, we'll need to create a content type. So for this, we need to go to the admin panel and click on content types. So we have all the content type groups, where we just need to go to the content one. And here it's a very simple installation, so you have already a couple of content types which come by default. Of course, they do not suit us, so we will create a new one. We'll create a new content type. Right. So, sorry, it looks ugly. Bertrand and I are back-end developers, and front-end developers did not do their work yet.
Their fault.
Okay, so we will give it a name. Name, well, let's call it right. We need an identifier. So of course we won't keep the. Yes, I can do that. Is it okay? Yeah. The identifier needs to be unique. So, well, there are a couple of best practices. Usually, I recommend to prefix your own identifiers, but we will keep simple. So we just call the identifier right. Okay. Identifier can only have alphanumeric characters and underscores. Description, we don't care. The content name pattern and URL alias pattern, we can leave them alone. Then it will be generated automatically. Basically, URL alias name pattern is how the URL will be generated. So we keep it automatically. And the content name pattern is the same for the content name itself. So if we leave everything blank, it will take the first field definition that we will create. So we will do that just in a second. Container is for how if we want our okay, 10 minutes before break. So we will create the content type and a few content, and then we'll go for a break. If we want the future content to have sub-items, so to be basically a container, well, we won't bother about the other ones. So for now, we don't have any content field definitions. So they are model for the fields. So we will create the first one. So here are the field types. So you can create field definitions are part of the content, like fields are field definitions are part of the content type, like fields are part of the content. Okay, so this is the abstraction of the field. A field definition uses a field type. So here you have a few of them. Here we just need a text line. So you have quite a few by default. It's like when you're designing a form, for instance. You will need a checkbox field type or whatever. It's the same idea here. So we'll need a text line, and we click on Add Field Definition. And here is our new field definition. So same, we will call it title with identifier title. The identifier of the field definition.
We add an arrow.
Already?
Failing to load the form.
Okay, I will continue here, and because we only have 10 minutes. So the identifier needs to be unique to the content type. Description, well, we don't need one. We need it to be required. The searchable checkbox is if we want it to be searchable by full text. So we can keep it checked. Translatable, if the field is translatable, yes, of course. Field group, we don't care. And here are settings for the validation, when we will just keep it as is. Then we will need a description. So we'll pick a different field type. As I said earlier, we want the description to be in rich text. So that you can edit right. So let's pick the rich text one and add it. So here we say Description. Well, it's not really required. Maybe the writer doesn't want to describe what he just want to post pictures online or stuff like that. So we leave it not required. Then we need, what do we need? I wrote everything down.
So some people are suggesting that if you get an error at this point, you should just own 777 the project. Don't ask me, I didn't build the VM. As far as we know, this part works. It's a bit young, but it's supposed to work.
Maybe it's because of Apache user. So yeah, it's a common problem. So yeah. Then we will use the author's field type to because we need the writer name. Okay, we could also use something else like just a pure text line, but author quite fits here. So we just add an author field type, field definition. Sorry. So we name it writer, and it's required. Okay. What is the next one? Distance. Non, j'ai oublié. Je le fais juste après. So distance, how long is the ride? So here we just use an integer. It's in kilometers. So integer field type. Meters? Yes.
Well, about this part, it's really actually very important what we are doing now. It's often a bit neglected. Some people try to say, okay, I will just put everything in the same type, it will be easier, I don't have to design it. Yeah, just like don't design your database and just put everything in a big table. No, that won't work. This is really the part where you model the domain of your websites. It's kind of critical because it's how your content is related, and how content is organized will have an impact on how you develop, on performances, on how cache is cleared, like what pages should be refreshed when something is updated or modified or removed. So it's really important that you think about it carefully because it will impact the whole project afterwards.
And here we have a very simple content model because we have a very, very simple website. But of course, in your projects, usually you will have more complex stuff. So the best practice is to always think about your content model very carefully. Because if you do a not so well designed content model, you will have issues in the future for your project. Well, it's like designing the database. So be very careful with these parts. And don't go for, well, yeah, I will go everything in text line. This can cause problems.
For instance, about a simple thing, if you have a text line for a number, you can't really use like greater than or lesser than and so on, and it limits filtering and sorting and everything. And yeah, you will have surprises. And right now, it's not very easy to change. Well, you can change the content type, but like migrating from one field type to another for a particular field, it's not easy.
Yeah.
It will most likely be improved later, but it's not a priority right now.
So now we need our starting point and end point for the ride. And for this, we have a map location field type. So we will use that for both of them. Yeah, made in Croatia, because implemented by Peter. So, starting point.
So speaking about specifics of field types, on this one, for instance, you can sort or filter on the distance between like the current point and the point in the content. Like give me restaurants less than 5 kilometers away from me. And it only works with this. So field types are like very, very, very important.
So it's required. Map location for endpoints as well.
and underscore points. And required as well. And then we need difficulty, I think. Yeah. And the last one is difficulty. So difficulty will be selection one. So selection is a bit more advanced. Basically, we'll have, because you can design options. Okay, it will be required as well. Difficulty. Okay. Here we don't have any options for now. It will be like a zero indexed list of options. Okay, so basically we need amateur, medium or intermediate, and hard. Let's say 3 levels. Okay, so let's say amateur the first. Well, for now the interface is not friendly, so we need to save.
But we have great plans to make it convenient, well, good looking first, and then also convenient to developers. It's a discussion we had with our graphical designers. We want it to be quick and easy to use. Like add field, maybe only use the keyboard and so on. And it will be better for the release, and the release is quite soon, so it will be better soon.
Yes, this will be way enhanced by JavaScript. Don't worry. So we add intermediate, and to add it, just click on the apply button. And hard, or pro, let's say. Iron Man, okay. And you will see why, because I will create content after that. And then we're done. So we click on OK to publish the content type, so to make it available. Because each time you're editing content type, it's creating a draft. So you're not editing what's already in production. That's a security. Okay, now that we have our content type, we need to edit some content very quickly. We go to the content structure. So click on content above, content structure. And, well, we don't need this. Minimize, create. Huh? Oh, yeah. Let's create one. And we want to create, we need to choose the content type, so we will create an instance of a ride. Okay. So I would just show, and we will fill this after the break because we are told to stop for now.
But for those not familiar with Easy, you can see that the form that was generated here is completely based on what was added as field definitions to the content type. So for instance, the location, you will be able to select the point on the map and so on. And editing interfaces for fields can be very, very different depending on what field type you used. And it's time for the break now. So see you in 15. And thank you.